Hello friends, in this video is the story of motorcycles. But before that, a little advertisement. Please check out the Hooligan channel. An interesting motovlog behind the wheel of a 750, lots of cool videos with rides, thoughts, motorcycle maintenance, and other useful information. High quality video, good sound, and excellent presentation. I recommend checking out and subscribing to the channel Hooligan. The link, as always, will be in the description. The company's founders came together due to World War I. Giorgio Perotti was a military pilot, and Carlo Guzzi was his mechanic. When peace came, they decided to start manufacturing motorcycles. Guzzi took on the design of the machine, while Perotti handled the organization of production. His father, a steamship line owner, financed the venture. The experimental motorcycle models bore the brand name, that is, Guzzi Perotti. But on March 21, 1921, the newly formed company was registered under the name Società Anonima Moto Guzzi. The motorcycle designed by Carlo Guzzi completely departed from the established conventions of those years, at least when it came to the power unit. The cylinder was positioned horizontally, and to shorten the wheelbase, Guzzi made the engine short stroke, 88 by 82 millimeters, with a displacement of 499 cubic centimeters. The huge external flywheel was striking. Carlo used the valve timing system common in those years, with the valves positioned one above the other, but in the cylinder head he placed not the intake valve, but the exhaust valve. The gear drive led to a rigidly attached 3-speed gearbox. The power unit was housed in a tubular duplex frame with a rigid rear suspension. At the front, there was a parallelogram fork. The machine weighed 130 kilograms, and the 8.5 horsepower engine accelerated it to a speed of 85 kilometers per hour. The company produced motorcycles built according to this design scheme all the way until 1976. That same year, 1921, marked the beginning of the company's sports career. By the end of the year, a motorcycle racer named Gino Finzi won the Targa Florio race, which brought fame to Guzzi motorcycles and their prototypes. Realizing all the advantages of this kind of subtle advertising, the company's founders decided to continue with the sports theme. By 1923, a special racing Model 2 with an overhead valve 18 horsepower engine was prepared, and in the next season, the 4 appeared on the tracks. With an engine featuring a 4-valve cylinder head and an overhead camshaft, it produced 25 horsepower. Guido Montazzi won the European Grand Prix on this motorcycle. Soon, the 250cc version of the machine debuted, first as a racing model and then as a road version. Carlo Guzzi presented the outstanding new model in 1928. The model featured a sprung rear wheel. The swing arm suspension, equipped with friction dampers, had a triangular design when viewed from the side. The tension springs ran underneath the engine. The engine power, still with vertically arranged valves, was increased to 12 horsepower. The same engine was also installed on the Model 14. In 1929, the company also began producing 3-wheeled cargo motorcycles. This type of vehicle was quite popular, so their production continued all the way until 1980. The decline in demand during the crisis years of the 1930s led to a revival of design activity. In 1932, in addition to the 250cc and 500cc road machines, the company released the Model 175 with a 174cc engine producing 7 horsepower. In 1933, a new series of 500cc machines debuted with overhead valve engines, 4-speed gearboxes with foot shifting, and sprung rear wheels. The 19 horsepower GTV model and the 23 horsepower GTW. But the company's flagship was to be the Model Tricylindri, introduced in 1933 with a horizontal 3-cylinder overhead valve, 495cc engine, producing 25 horsepower. Unfortunately, the complex and expensive machine did not excite buyers, and only 12 of these units were made. But still, it was in increasing the number of cylinders that Carlo Guzzi saw the path to success, at least on the racing tracks. Back in 1930, he tested a motorcycle with a horizontal 492cc 4-cylinder overhead valve engine equipped with a supercharger. Although this unit produced as much as 45 horsepower, it turned out to be too unreliable. A much more successful design was developed in 1933 featuring a 2-cylinder V-shaped 495cc engine. For smoother operation, Guzzi chose a 120-degree V-angle, positioning the front cylinder horizontally. The overhead camshafts, 1 per cylinder head, were driven by shafts and a pair of mechanical gears. The engine produced a maximum power of 40 horsepower, and by 1935 it was increased to 45. At that time, the engine was installed in a new chassis with a sprung rear wheel. On this motorcycle, Stenley Woods won the 1935 Tourist Trophy race, and on the single-cylinder 250cc version, he won the race in the 250 cubic centimeters class. In the mid-1930s, the company established strong business relations with the Italian Army. Tricycles were popular with the military due to their relative low cost, load capacity, and good driving performance. The Model 32 motor tricycle was the first 3-wheeled vehicle used by the Italian Army during World War II. The motor tricycle began to be used in 1935 when Italy occupied East Africa. The 32 motor tricycle was a 3-wheeled version of the Model 15. During World War II, the company produced the Alce military motorcycle, equipped with a 499cc engine with a power of 13.2 horsepower and its 3-wheeled version called Trialci. From 1938 to 1942, the Moto Guzzi EER tricycle model was produced. Compared to the Trialci, the tricycle received a new, sturdy frame made of pressed steel. The rear wheel rims and their supporting swivel brackets were made from the same material. The gearbox, combined with the engine in a single unit, had 3 forward gears and 1 reverse gear. The load capacity of the model increased to 1,000 kilograms. Fortunately, the factory, located far from major cities, was not damaged by bombings, and after the war was able to quickly resume the production of motorcycles for civilian use. Along with resuming the production of pre-war models, the 250 cubic centimeter Arona and the 500 cubic centimeter, the company introduced the lightweight Guzzina motorcycle in 1946. And designed by the young engineer Antonio Muccichi, this machine had nothing in common with the traditional design. A single-cylinder 2-stroke engine, 65 cubic centimeters, 2 horsepower, with a rotary valve. At the intake, a 3-speed gearbox, a backbone tubular frame, a swing arm suspension with a single spring element at the base of the swing arm, and a front parallelogram fork. It's no wonder that this simple-to-produce machine became a bestseller in post-war impoverished Italy. Then the company carried out a reconstruction of the pre-war models. In 1948, Aron received a front telescopic fork. Along with the standard model with a 9.5 horsepower engine, they began producing a version with 13.5 horsepower and a top speed of 118 kilometers per hour. In 1949, the model was replaced by one with a 499cc engine, producing 19.5 horsepower, a telescopic fork in the front, and a rear suspension with hydraulic shock absorbers. The sports model released the following year had a 500cc engine with 23 horsepower and a top speed of 135 kilometers per hour. But strangely enough, it went back to friction shock absorbers. Moreover, in 1953, the engine from Astor was installed on the Falcone chassis. This modification was called the Falcone Turismo Vreme. The company expanded its range of lightweight models designed by Muccichi. In response to the growing scooter trend, the firm introduced a model in 1950 that was a strange symbiosis of a motorcycle and a scooter. The engine, built in traditional style, was a horizontal single-cylinder overhead valve unit with a displacement of 160 cc and a power output of 6.5 horsepower, paired with a 3-speed gearbox, and was located in the tunnel between the rider's legs. The machine had 17-inch wheels, and an additional spare wheel was mounted in front of the front fairing shield. In 1952, the machine was equipped with a 4-speed gearbox and a 175cc engine with a power output of 7 horsepower. And in 1954, the engine displacement was increased to 192 cc and the power to 7.5 horsepower. Strangely enough, the hybrid caught on. It was produced until 1966, and more than 70,000 were made during that time. Another design by Muccichi debuted in 1953. The lightweight motorcycle Gigolo had a horizontal 2-stroke 98cc engine, 4 horsepower in the standard version, and 6.8 in the sports version. It had a 3-speed gearbox, a front telescopic fork, rear suspension with friction shock absorbers, and a covered space between the engine and the fuel tank. In 1959, the Gigolo received a 110cc engine with a power of 4.8 horsepower chrome-plated cylinder mirrors and hydraulic shock absorbers for the rear suspension. And in 1954, the Guzzina model was replaced by the modernized Cardellina model in 1956, which received a telescopic front fork instead of the parallelogram one in 1957. The engine displacement increased to 73 cubic centimeters and the power to 2.6 horsepower. And after another update in 1962, these parameters increased to 83 cubic centimeters and 2.9 horsepower. After the war, the company's racing department was headed by engineer Giulio Carcano. By the 1949 season, he had upgraded the old model machines. They received a low, elongated silhouette. Carcano believed in the positive effect of a low center of gravity on handling, and they also got short arm front forks. Bruno Ruffo became the world champion in the 250 cubic centimeters class. The following year, riders on Moto Guzzi in this category took places from 2nd to 5th, but missed out on the championship title. Carcano responded to the challenge by creating an engine with 2 overhead camshafts and a 4-valve cylinder head, but the design turned out to be unsuccessful, so he focused on improving the old engine. This brought success. Ruffo became world champion again in 1951 and Enrico Lorenzetti in 1952. The following year, the company decided to shift its focus to larger displacement engines. While the 350cc racing machine was a direct development of the 250cc, simply bored out to 326cc, a completely new one was designed for the senior class races. A machine with a longitudinally mounted inline engine with a displacement of 492cc and a power output of 54 horsepower, with 2 overhead camshafts driven by gears, liquid cooling, and a fuel injection system. The power unit was also the main load-bearing element of the chassis. The front short arm fork and the rear swing arm suspension were attached to it through lightweight tubular subframes. Unfortunately, in races, this machine did not prove itself in the best way. But in the 350 class, the Englishman Fergus Anderson, on a single-cylinder machine, won the world champion title, and 5 Lorenzetti took second place. By the 1954 season, Carcana had prepared a new single-cylinder machine for races in the 350 and 500 classes, with 2 overhead camshafts, a tubular space frame that allowed the center of gravity to be set very low, and a fairing covering the entire front part of the motorcycle, developed with wind tunnel aerodynamic testing in mind. Anderson once again became the world champion in the 350 class, and the Australian Ken Kavanagh took third place in the 500 class. Another Englishman, Bill Lomas, brought championship titles in the 350 class in 1955 and 1956. In the summer of 1955, perhaps the most complex racing motorcycle of all time hit the track. The new 500 with an 8-cylinder V-shaped engine. 2 blocks of cylinders were arranged at a 90-degree angle, and each head housed 2 overhead camshafts. This unit was fed by 8 carburetors, with ignition provided by 8 coils and 4 interrupters. The liquid-cooled engine was paired with a 4-speed gearbox, although initially Carcana designed a 6-speed, but that turned out to be unnecessary. The 1956 version produced 67 horsepower at 12,500 RPM. By the next season, the power was increased to 75 horsepower. The motorcycle proved to be extremely fast, but unreliable. It never managed to win a single race that counted towards the World Championship. However, the single-cylinder machine brought the team another championship title in the 350 class in 1957. At the end of that same year, it entered into a secret agreement with the Italian companies Mondial and Gilera, all 3 giants who in many ways defined the face of motorcycle racing in the 50s, were leaving big sports at the same time. This decision was not a whim. The appearance of cars like the 600 on the market dealt a heavy blow to motorcycle manufacturers. By saving money on motorsports, they were able to invest in creating new road models. In April 1956, the company introduced a completely new motorcycle, tilted forward at a 45-degree angle. A single-cylinder 4-stroke engine with a displacement of 174 cubic centimeters and a power output of 9 horsepower, with an overhead camshaft driven by a chain, a duplex frame, a front telescopic fork, and a rear swing arm suspension with hydraulic shock absorbers. In 1959, the company introduced a version of this motorcycle with a 235 cubic centimeter engine producing 11 horsepower. HP. The motorcycle shown in the same year became quite popular, a 123 cubic centimeter 7 horsepower engine with an overhead valve pushrod drive and a slightly forward tilted cylinder, a lightweight duplex frame, telescopic fork in the front, and a swing arm suspension in the rear. In 1967, this machine was thoroughly modernized. The power of the 123 cubic centimeter engine was increased to 10 horsepower. A 153 cubic centimeter version, the 160 appeared with an engine output of 12.7 horsepower. In 1971, the power of both versions was increased to 13 and 16 horsepower, respectively. The 4-speed gearbox was replaced by a 5-speed gearbox. Another lightweight motorcycle designed by Muchiki appeared in 1963. The Dingo model with a 2-stroke 49cc engine producing 1.5 horsepower, a 3-speed gearbox, and a stamped backbone frame. This motorcycle was produced until 1979 in many versions, starting in 1966. The moped started with an engine of 41 cubic centimeters and a power of 1.23 horsepower. and a 2-speed gearbox. But the future of the company was not in these light vehicles. It was pointed out by a 3-wheeled all-terrain vehicle developed at the end of the 1950s by order of the Ministry of Defense. The all-wheel drive model, which debuted in Geneva in 1960, is a very complex design even by today's standards. Initially, it was planned to install a 500cc single-cylinder engine on the tricycle, which was used in another famous tricycle, the 503-2. However, this engine turned out to be insufficiently powerful, so a completely new V-shaped engine with a displacement of 750cc was developed, which was named V7 in honor of its creator. In reality, Mula the mechanic fell short of expectations. In 1963, production was discontinued and only 200 units were produced. In the fall of 1965, the public saw a car called Bicylindrica 700, a 4-cylinder engine with 50 horsepower connected to a 4-speed gearbox, is mounted longitudinally according to the crankshaft position in a tubular duplex frame. The rear wheel is driven by a drive shaft. According to the company, this 243-kilogram machine was capable of accelerating up to 170 kilometers per hour. It wasn't possible to confirm this immediately. In 1966, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy and effectively came under government control. It was only in 1967 that mass production of the 2-cylinder cars began, and it turned out that they were already outdated. Engineer Lino Tonki took on their modernization. First, in 1969, he presented a modernized version. By increasing the engine displacement to 748 cubic centimeters and the power to 60 horsepower, he simultaneously reduced the car's weight to 228 kilograms. In 1970, for the first time, this car received American styling, high handlebars, a laid-back seat, and the name 5750. But the main novelty of that year was a model equipped with an engine boosted to 70 horsepower and a 5-speed gearbox. But, most importantly, this machine not only had excellent dynamics, a top speed of 205 kilometers per hour and 0 to 100 in 5 seconds, but also a sleek appearance in the cafe racer style. For police needs, the company carried out a complete update in 1969. Of the model, it received an overhead valve engine boosted to 25.5 horsepower, retaining the same dimensions of 88 by 82 millimeters as the original model from 2021. A 5-speed gearbox, rear swing arm, suspension with hydraulic shock absorbers, and a modern appearance. However, the police were hardly interested in the nuances of fashion, while the civilian public reacted coolly to the new incarnation of the legend. In the early 70s, the owner of the company became the industrialist Alejandro de Tomaso, who already owned another famous Italian motorcycle company, Benelli. The first result of this integration was the appearance of a whole range of motorcycles in 1973-1974, from the 50 cubic centimeter single-cylinder 2-stroke model to the 350 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder 4-stroke model. Simultaneously, resources became available for motorcycle development under the brand, unique twins that have already become a symbol of the company. In 1972, the 750cc models were replaced by machines with a modernized power unit with a displacement of 844 cubic centimeters, a power output of 64.5 horsepower, and a 5-speed gearbox. Since 1973, heavy motorcycles have been equipped with disc brakes with hydraulic drive. A small sensation was caused in the fall of 1975 by the touring machine 1000 with an automatic car-type transmission, a 949 cubic centimeter engine with a power output of 71 horsepower, a large windshield, and luggage cases, And a year later, the company presented a much more convincing trump card, the Road Sport motorcycle 850 with an 844 cubic centimeter engine producing 81 horsepower. With cast wheels and a magnificent appearance, designed by the famous Atelier. At that time, the company's motorcycles began to implement an integrated braking system, which is also characteristic of modern Moto Guzzi bikes. The bet on selling mid-range motorcycles under the brand did not pay off, and he made the decision to develop a machine in this category following the company's traditions, with a two-cylinder V-shaped engine and a shaft drive to the rear wheel. These models have an engine displacement of 346 cubic centimeters and a power output of 33.5 horsepower. And the V50, with a displacement of 490 and a power output of 45, were presented to the public in 1976. The demand for the new models was so high that they had to use a former factory in Milan for their assembly. In addition to the classic versions, in 1981, they began production of the sporty models V35 Imola and V50 Monza, as well as the American-style V35 Custom and V50 Chopper. At the same time, the company's larger models, such as the Sport, Touring, and Americanized versions, switched to the new 949 cubic centimeter engine. The gap between the small and large models was filled in 1982 with the introduction of the 565 model, with an engine displacement of 643 cubic centimeters and a power output of 52 horsepower. And a year later, a more powerful version appeared, 744 cubic centimeters and 65 horsepower. The debut of off-road style motorcycles in 1983 turned out to be somewhat unexpected, with models featuring an engine displacement of 346 cubic centimeters and 31 horsepower, and a model with an engine displacement of 649 cubic centimeters and 48 horsepower. Of course, these impressive machines in terms of size and weight are hard to consider true off-road conquerors, although the company actively showcased special versions at prestigious rally raids. Over time, they turned into powerful enduro bikes for traveling. The culmination of this process was the 1991 model with an engine displacement of 948 cubic centimeters and a power output of 70 horsepower. At the time of its debut, it was the most powerful and heaviest off-road motorcycle in the world, weighing 210 kilograms. The engines were also successfully used in such racing series. In the late 80s, the company invited one of the best specialists in creating racing motorcycles in this category, the American Dr. John Whitner, to develop a new sports motorcycle. The prototype he created was presented in the fall of 1989, and 2 years later the production version was shown. 1000. The V-shaped 992cc engine received 4 valve cylinder heads, high-mounted camshafts, and a fuel injection system. Thanks to this, the maximum power was increased to 95 horsepower at 8,000 revolutions per minute. Whitner redesigned the chassis as well, a strong backbone frame and a special rear suspension design that minimizes the reactions of the driveshaft. The rather expensive to produce engine led to the appearance in 1993 of the 1100 model with carburetors, 2 valve heads, and a central camshaft. By increasing the engine displacement, it was possible to maintain the power output at the level of 90 horsepower. In 1996, a fuel injection system was installed on this engine, and a year later it was detuned to 74 horsepower. This version of the engine was received. Currently, the company produces 3 model ranges designed in the American style, the semi-sought Piat Daciat and its family, as well as the Road Sport 8 series. In the summer of 2000, it was acquired by an Italian concern, and in 2004, together with it, became part of a corporation. Since the mid-1960s of the last century, the company's calling card became the two-cylinder V-shaped engine with a longitudinally mounted crankshaft and protruding side cylinders. The engine design is conservative. They have retained air cooling, and some of the engines still use two-valve cylinder heads with pushrod valve actuation. 4-valve heads with overhead camshafts only went into production in 2008. Today, the most popular bikes among buyers are the 1200, 1200, and the Norga 1200 as well. It is precisely due to the high sales of these motorcycle models that the company remains one of the leaders in Italian motorcycle manufacturing. In our region, it has not become widespread and is a real rarity on the roads. And that's all.